So we are 5 past the hour. We are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone and welcome to NAMIC-Virginia and NAMIC-New England's joint event. Let's talk about it. Are you listening? We would love to we'd love that you were able to join us this evening. NAMIC-Virginia, as well as NAMIC-New England, we are on a mission to educate, advocate, and empower for multi-ethnicity in the communications industry. Both chapters are very appreciative of the support from our members, corporate sponsors, volunteers, partners, and some of which are on the call today. We hope that you will gain a lot of insight from this dialogue. We are so excited to have you with us today. And I will now hand it off to NAMIC-New England Chapter President to introduce the moderator and the panelists for this evening's session. Camila, take it away.
Thank you, Lakeisha. Good afternoon. On behalf of NAMIC-New England, I would also like to welcome everyone to our discussion. I'm so happy to introduce our dynamic speakers today. We have our moderator, J.D. Myers II, and he is the Senior Vice President and Virginia Region Manager at Cox Communications. He's a telecommunications industry leader with more than 30 years experience in operations, marketing, and sales. JD joined Cox in 2006 and leads the Virginia and North Carolina region, including approximately 2,400 employees across 4 markets: Hampton Roads, Northern Virginia, Roanoke, and Currituck. His prior Cox roles include Market Vice President and Vice President of Cox Business in Northern Virginia. JD has been recently named the 2020 Top 100 People to Meet in Virginia and named the 2020 Inside Business Power List. So he's been on that list too. And he's among Cablefact's most influential minorities in cable for over 4 years. And he reaffirmed his commitment to diversity by serving as one of the executive sponsors of our Virginia NAMIC chapter. So we are so thankful and happy to have JD here with us today. So I want to let everybody know about our dynamic panelists who are here with us. We have Mike Garner, who is the VP and CDO of the New York City Metropolitan Transportation Authority and president of the 100 Black Men New York City chapter. Mike is a champion of diversity and works to empower emerging and established minority, women-owned, and disadvantaged business enterprises in New York State. In addition to his role as president of the founding chapter of 100 Black Men, he is also on the board of Harlem Hospital, a member of New York City's Comptroller Scott Stringer's MWBE Advisory Council, advises various cities and states on their minority business development and inclusion programs, and formerly serving as a member of the New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo's MWBE team and New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio MWBE Advisory Committee. So we'd like to welcome Mike today. And next we have also Kela Hall. She is the principal CEO of KD Hall Communications, co-founder of KD Hall Foundation, and also a filmmaker. She has years of experience in higher education, crisis management, communication management, and strategic professional planning. She's a visionary, a creator, a leader in workforce development and women's initiatives. She holds a bachelor's degree in mass communications with a minor in broadcasting journalism, and also holds an MBA. KD Hall Communications LLC specializes in public relations, storytelling, and organizational development. KD is a member of the Washington State's Women's Commission Task Force. So let's welcome Kela Hall today here as well. Next up, we have Camron Phillips. He's a social justice leader and advocacy chair for the NAACP Chesapeake and Urban League of Hampton Roads Young Professionals. He's a proud Mercer County School System, University of Maryland, University College, one of my alma maters, and the University of Notre Dame School of Business alumnus. He's a 14-year U.S. Navy sailor. Additionally, a nonprofit organizational consultant and funding development business owner. In Cameron's words, and I quote, "I am the change I dreamed of and will continue to help my community make the changes they desire to in order to break the oppressive cycles of systemic and racial injustices." So let's welcome Camron also. And to round up our panel, but certainly not least, we have Noah Prince Sr. He's a consultant and director of consultant development with an organization called White Men as Full Diversity Partners. Noah is a highly sought diversity, equity, and inclusion facilitator and a consultant that specializes in supporting insiders in different organizations, challenging them to think about culture and take steps towards being allies and champions for inclusion. Noah has 15 years of experience as a leader in equity and inclusion and leadership development work. Noah has a BA in Black feminism and a MED in urban education. He's a former educator, and he is highly passionate about advocating for Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, and also for children. I would now like to turn the event over to our moderator, JD Myers, and take it away, JD.
Thank you so very much for the introduction and to this phenomenal panel. I am so humbled to have this opportunity to facilitate this panel. And some of you I have never met, so I look forward to having relationships with you beyond this panel. And once again, I'll put that plug out. If NAMIC National is listening, we want to do this at Diversity Week. We're all available. We want to do it at Diversity Week. So let me put the plug out there. It's in here. All right, so let's get started here. We really want to have some real talk. I mean, you've got people on this panel from different places in the world, doing different things in the community, all walks of life, dealing with inclusion, diversity, and equity. And we need to kind of have some real talk here. So we're going to have some real talk this evening. We're hoping that you're going to hear about some things that people are talking about right now today that everybody in the world is now talking about, but nobody really wants to talk about. So we're going to talk about them today. So let's get started. So I'm going to get started with my rock stars here on the panel. So we've got many champions of diversity, inclusion, and equity. So before I get started, I want to have them do something basic. So if I get each one of you just to take 1 to 2 minutes top, and explain to us what initiatives you are supporting or leading in your organizations or communities to help improve race relations. So who wants to kick us off? Don't be bashful. I'm going to start calling out names. All right, Camron, thank you for leading us off. I appreciate it, my friend.
So you're welcome. And then thank you all for allowing me to speak here today. I'm very honored, very honored for this. One of the things that we've already kind of jumped into were especially when it comes to discussing race relations, were committee forums, in which some people on this event tonight were part of that community forum here within our own community. And it really just got started with individuals saying, hey, I have a problem. I want to help, don't know how to help, or, hey, I'm really angry about what's going on. We have a great diversified 1,100 citizens within where we live of Culpeper Landing and Deep Creek, Chesapeake. Very, very diversified. And the problem though is that we don't really know what's going on sometimes with our neighbors. So what we did was we came together and literally behind the community pool house, and there was about 65 of us, and we just had open mic. I was able to break down some different things going on as far as what's going on in the nation, from NAACP, Chesapeake perspective, Urban League, Hampton Roads perspective. And once we then went over some questions on how to relate, not necessarily on experience, but how to relate on emotions, because that's what was key, was we then opened it up for open mics, and all different ethnicities were able to speak and say, oh, wow, I didn't know that, or wow, this is how I feel. So that's how we started. That's a key thing first is do something within your reach, within your community, and you see them also making the same changes and effects within their reach as well. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Who else wants to lean in? I see Mike has joined. Looks like he's in a car service, I think, up there in New York. So Mike, you want to lean in on that?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. As president of the founding chapter of the 100 Black Men, we are advising many corporations. So as recent as about a year ago, we signed a big deal via the National Football League, where we were advising them on how to further diversify their ranks. So they gave us the opportunity to recruit Black male college students who are majoring in sports management or sports medicine. And so we were gratified that last year that we signed that big deal. Secondly, Hennessy reached out and gave us $1 million, and we are advising them on how they can have a big major impact on the small business community, including small Black businesses, small Asian businesses, and small Hispanic businesses. So they invested $3 million, and they wanted us to recruit and find small businesses for grant opportunities, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. So one of the advantages of being in the Fortune 500 capital of the world is that you have the opportunity to influence key decision makers at these Fortune 500 corporations. And so we have been leading the way and leading the efforts, and in fact doing that.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm gonna go ahead and jump on the mic. We adding a woman's voice to the perspective that we're speaking about today. I'm Katie Hall. I'm from Detroit. I lived in New York, and now I live in Seattle. I consider myself a national person that's been around in different parts of our country. And what I do is really I stimulate thoughts. I stimulate thoughts with leaders in our state and across the country, as well as with college students in particular. The reason why we chose college students is because education is really where the real, in my opinion, that's where things start. That's where things start at, and we really want to be able to change the minds of young people or be able to get them to think creatively for themselves. So in particular, in the last 5 years, me and my husband, we started Katie Hall Foundation. And I would love to speak to Mr. Garner, because we have not been an organization that's received a lot of funding, but we have made great impact. We have graduated 60 college students, most of those students being women, and most of them being Black women or African women from other countries. And what we do is we stimulate leadership. We talk about money, we talk about economics, we talk about negotiating, we talk about their worth. And we also have done a really great job with bridging gaps across our state. So we bring the police, we bring the Democrats, we bring the Republicans, we bring the community, the gangsters, whoever you want, and we bring everybody together into one place, and we make people have real conversations. And we have done that. We also follow up with every dollar that we do get. 90% of those dollars go directly to our college students to help them prepare for a workforce where they can go in and really be able to dismantle systemic racism, dismantle sexism. I use my collegiate experience in journalism, and I use my network to ensure that we're not just doing conferences, but that we're also on TV as well. So anyways, a little bit about me. I'm excited to be a part of this panel.
Thank you, Kaylee. Really appreciate you. So last but not least, Mr. Noah, where are you out there?
Awesome. Great. Love joining in with this. Yeah, on a professional angle, similar to some of the other panelists, the focus of the company that I work with is on the C-suite executive boardrooms of Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies. And I work really with other white men in one angle of this work, helping us unpack white privilege, blind spots around that, connecting that to systemic racism, connecting that from a place of heartfelt leadership, but then back to systemic analysis and actually moving the needle. And so my work is really around helping white men understand that we often see ourselves as individuals and that there's a privilege that allows us to do so. So also helping us understand and consciously verbalize that we are members of different groups, including being white, including being male. And both of those have unconscious and conscious impact on our mindsets and behaviors when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. On a personal level, I'd say I've been on this, I'm 41 now, I'm a millennial, really baptized by hip hop like so many of my generation, and I wouldn't probably be in this conversation if it wasn't for that in certain ways, as well as my parents, who definitely came up with the civil rights era and had me. My mom was the first one to call me out when I made a racist remark at age of 7 and said, we don't use that language and it's time for you to learn about Dr. King. So my mom was the first activist in my life that exposed me to a higher level of consciousness, and connecting that all the way back up the dots to now, I try to help professional white men unpack early experiences and professional experiences that might be hindering them from being full diversity partners.
Awesome. Noah, thank you. Thank you, all of you. And Noah, I'm going to come back to that point you made. I just made a note about white privilege. I thought I'd get a chance to drop that bomb later on in the presentation, but you beat me to it. So because you beat me to it, we're going to come back to that because I want to unpack that a little more. So if you're open to that, we'll have that conversation.
I'll put a stamp on it.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So Mike, I'm going to drill you on this question because there's a lot of decisions that are being made, legislative decisions regarding police reform. It's all in the news. But let's face it, Mike, a lot of people don't even understand what police reform is, let alone why it's needed. And that's really troubling to me. Some of them a lot of people get it confused too. They get it confused with the term of defunding the police. And we know these aren't the same thing. So I need you to help bring some clarity to all the audience really about what police reform is, what its purpose is, and how and what will it solve in our communities.
So in addition to me being the president of the founding chapter of the 100 Black Men, I'm also part of the Garner family. And so Eric Garner was my cousin. And so I think that I know that the lesson that we learned here was when Eric was murdered in 2014 of the mayor, when no one else took action. And so the family, including Gwen Carr, his mother, who was probably the strongest person I know, who stood out there for 6 years and fought until justice was served and the officer was finally fired. And so in addition to the Garner family, the National Action Network and Reverend Al Sharpton stood with us toe to toe during this whole time period. So the lesson that was learned from Eric Garner when this same thing happened in Minnesota a few weeks ago was that the leadership in Minnesota immediately fired the officers, indicted them, and jailed them, and they're going to trial. That was the lesson that was learned, regardless of who murders who. I don't care if you are wearing a blue uniform. If you murder somebody, you should get fired, arrested, and prosecuted by the fullest extent of the law. And so one thing that we did also as a family was we fought and we got sponsorship of a bill in the state Senate and the state assembly that if you use a illegal chokehold as a law enforcement officer, you would be fired and prosecuted. And that bill passed both houses and was signed into law by Governor Andrew Cuomo 3 weeks ago. And so reform is one thing. Defunding law enforcement agencies is something else. But we need to be able to have the ability to work with our officials to create laws and have those laws passed and enforced, because no one should be put in a illegal chokehold in this country. And you see it's happening more so than it's not, because it's being televised and it's being filmed. And so the message is that, in the words of Bob Marley, you got to fight for your rights. And the Garner family did that, led by Gwen Carr, who was the mother of Eric Garner.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for that. I totally agree with you. So I'm going to stay on that path. And Kaylee, I want to kind of bring you back into this conversation. And so I have family and friends that are both in law enforcement. And I know there are some good law enforcement officers out there. There's many of them. But I also know there's some bad apples out there. And the bad apples should never be in an occupation like law enforcement, not one. So, but we all do agree we need law enforcement. So how do we take this law enforcement and take that organization and build strategic relationships in the communities where Black people of color, where people of color reside? How do we do that?
That's an excellent question. It's also complex. And I wanted to start with a little bit of story before I answer that question, because it'll make sense. So Seattle Police Department is one of our funders, and they have been a funder of our foundation for the last 5 years. So to take the clock back 15 years ago, I myself was facing federal prison time. I was facing 30 years in prison. I was a student graduating from college. I made a really bad mistake. And because of the fact that maybe my family didn't have the money or the prestige, I was facing 30 years in prison for something that maybe I should have got a misdemeanor for. Long story short, I did not go to prison. I was the only person out of 15 people involved in this conspiracy that did not go to prison. I got my college degree within 2 weeks of being considered a felon of the United States of America. Anybody that knows what it's like to have a federal felony, the roads are stacked against you, on top of being Black, on top of being a woman, everything's stacked against you. So one of the things that we did with Katie Hall Foundation, we purposely went after the police department, the Supreme Courts, as well as the governor, most of the mayors in our area, and we started having real conversations with them. Our chief of police is a Black woman named Chief Carmen Best. She's a friend. Even before she was the chief of police, we were making them come and build those relationships. We would not let them off the hook. We were also respectful, because like you said, there's cops out here that are trying to make a good living just like the rest of us. But there is a real systemic issue in law enforcement, just with the way they think, the way they operate. Even my husband, he was an Air Force veteran, and he also was looking to go into law enforcement. He made it to the final round, and they told him, you're lying on your lie detector test. Now, I'm the felon in the family. My husband's clean as a whistle. And for them to tell him you're lying about your name, and that's the reason why he did not get that job. After that happened, we started having conversations with Carmen Best about their systems and how they do these lie detectors tests. So I guess what I would say to you is, it's going to be a long road to really be able to build strategic relationships with police officers. I think all of us have a role in that, and we just start making people answer questions. I even called Carmen Best before this call. I said, hey, I want to give you a heads up. We're coming to meet with you in 2 weeks. We're doing a documentary on law enforcement, and I'm giving you a heads up now, but we're going to ask the hard questions. So I think building relationships with these individuals are key. Making them come into spaces and rooms. And when I say making them, by building relationships, getting them to come to spaces and rooms and be able to talk about some of the systemic issues. And even like what the Garner family said, they really fought hard. And because of that, they were able to change laws. You can't get anything done unless you start getting into the laws. And that's the reason why we like to partner FBI, the Supreme Court, because that's how I got my felony, through the Supreme Court. Right? And just being able to educate individuals and make it normal to have those type of conversations. And one thing I will say, and we put this out in writing, that in the event that a police officer hurts, harm, kill, or even things that are more minor than that, right? They really should be held accountable. They're just like us. They should be held accountable. And I stand behind that, and our foundation stands behind that as well.
Hopefully we will continue to evolve as a population politically, especially on the political side, and that accountability comes in place so they're no longer above the law. Because like you said, it's a systemic issue, but it may be a systemic culture issue versus a people issue. And we'll have to spend some more time unpacking that if we get a chance to get to that, because I'm sure you've got some more insights into that.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So Camron, let's go back to the 757 for a minute. I know you said something about your neighborhood. I think I wrote that down because I know someone else that rang a bell when you said that about that neighborhood. I know somebody else that lives in that neighborhood. So now I know how you got on this panel. You must have got stalked.
Stalked, I don't know about that, but I was approached. But and it's crazy. Going back to that community forum aspect, I was on the phone call with multiple people, just as far as like politicians wise, as far as people, senators, delegates, things like that, and we were looking at the Justice Act and how can we support and what can we do, and then it wasn't until two women within my community on our Nextdoor app that said, what can we do within our community? And what really hit me even harder was that there were two white women had put on our Nextdoor app saying, what can we do? How can we help? And I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I felt like I was literally forgetting my community as far as my reach wise, right? And so I automatically scaled back, contacted them and said, I love the fact you all want to help. This is how I think I can help you. What is your vision in this? And I had to rearrange my piece of this puzzle to see, okay, what can I add to this? How can I help you? And because the idea is that you're going to be in conversations, you're going to be in areas and events that I can't be a part of, that I'm not going to be a part of. So I need you to advocate on our behalf for this. And so that's how it started. And within 48 hours, 700 flyers went out. 4 hours one morning, another 4 hours the next day, just canvassing door to door to door. Next thing you know, a good 65 people showed up within 48 hours to have this kind of discussion. And then since then, we end up actually adding a cultural diversity education and training program under our social committee here within our community to have this every month now.
That is phenomenal. I mean, I've been kind of talking about this, and I think I've heard this vibe a lot during this process, and that's we must educate the uneducated. We've got to figure that out. And if we can figure out collectively how to educate each other, we can then collectively move this movement forward. So I commend you on kind of putting that together. Thank you for that. So Noah, let me put you into this. When I talk about educating the uneducated, I think that could be a t-shirt you wear. So let's figure out how we talk about that a little bit, unpack that a little bit. So if we look at it from a personal perspective, right? If you look at this and you look at the executives you deal with, what are they struggling with as it relates to race in their organizations?
That's a good question. I think there's several different pieces to that. As noted earlier, I think that a lot of white people in general, myself too at one point in my development, have been privileged to see ourselves as individuals. And here's what I mean by that as connected to your earlier conversation. I have sold cocaine. I have sold weed. I have broken laws. I was kicked out of high school. I've been a knucklehead for my teenage years and into my early 20s, to say the least. And I'm definitely accomplished now. I'm definitely on the good side. I have good orderly direction, all of that. So I'm not selling myself short, nothing. But every time I would get into a self-made predicament or my emotions got the better of me in my anger in my teenage years, whatever the case may be, I was given benefit of the doubt as an individual. I have not been labeled a gang member, and I ran with a crew of delinquents. I have not been labeled a terrorist. I have not been labeled a drug dealer. I have been labeled, when I was at my worst 25 years ago, I was labeled a troubled teen that needed support. And so for me personally, my connection is always, I came into this thinking of racism is an individual thing. Somebody's mean to somebody else. Somebody's bad to somebody else because of the color of skin, but we're all individuals, because I was treated as an individual for much of my earlier life. And then when I went to start going to black high school, and after high school, moving to Philadelphia, becoming a public school teacher, getting very involved in activist movements for racial equality, police reform. I do support mechanisms of defunding the police too. Let me just publicly say, and I don't see that as anti-law enforcement to hold that ideology. I think reform is necessary, and I think we also overspend our dollars on our police and could spend them more equitably when we think about reparations. Nonetheless, my development wasn't seen that I am a white person as well. As funny as that probably sounds to a panelist of black colleagues, I'm sure whenever I talk to black people, they tend to have been seen their race their whole life. And when I talk to white people, they were privileged to see themselves as an individual. So I hope executives understand that. And I help them understand that white isn't a monolithic thing, that there's still diversity. We have unique life experiences under that. We're not all the same. And there's something that goes with our skin color that puts wind at our backs in the corporate arena, in the business arena, in the law enforcement arena, in the economic arena, whereas it puts wind in the faces of others. And being able to recognize that and understand that is a step. And then reframing privilege, as we spoke of earlier, not as meaning that everything has been given to you, not as meaning that you don't work at all, but meaning that you don't have to assimilate into mainstream culture. You don't have to spend energy on your identity. You don't have to second guess any micro action throughout the day as it pertains to your race. And that there's a lot of energy that other people have to expend on that if they didn't, they could be probably pretty far ahead in their lives. So thinking about privilege in that aspect really helps open some minds as well.
That was profound. I can tell you, I took a couple of nuggets from you, so I'm going to take credit for them later on. I just want to warn you now.
Absolutely.
To take a couple of nuggets from you, but help clarify this one piece for me, and then we're going to go off this topic of white privilege. So when I bring that topic up, typically white people get in their feelings, like I'm singing a Drake song or something. Everybody's getting in their feelings all of a sudden when I start bringing that topic up. And it's really, white privilege has nothing to do with how much money you had, the way you were raised. And there's an illusion that that's what that means. And it means nothing of the such. So can you help me with that?
Yes, absolutely. The scholar Ibram X. Kendi, who many of us are familiar with, is a New York Times bestseller now with the book How to Be Anti-Racist, has a very poignant point where he says that racism and the term racist has become a pejorative in American society. To call a white person racist is almost worse than calling one a rapist, and that's a profound falsity. I try to structure the work around the fact that no one is personally to blame, but we are responsible for changing this narrative. And the fact that when we use the term racism, we're not describing someone's soul or their destiny, we're describing their behavior and how it, in effect, colludes with the system that oppresses people of color. If we can understand that and depersonalize our ego and our fragility, we can go a lot further. That requires some humility. So the thing with privilege, and I didn't grow up with money. There was a time earlier that I would have probably rejected that term. But the thing is to really, again, understand that there's areas in your life where even as a white person, you could be an outsider, as you mentioned, class, maybe religion. I'm not Christian, for instance. Those things could make you an outsider in certain ways. And yet, as I described in my earlier narrative, my individual actions as a white person, even when negative to society, we're not judged with the harshness, and we're given a second opportunity and grace. And I would even dare say I've been allowed to be a mediocre white man in the start of my career, where I know people of color, including my Black wife, who's a nurse practitioner, have to come 2 or 3 times as hard. I've been allowed to be mediocre for 10 years before I got excellent. You understand what I'm saying? I had a brother tell me once, he's like, man, when I die and go to heaven, I hope I get to experience life as a mediocre white male. That must be a good life.
I've actually heard that statement a lot. So.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
I'm not self-deprecating. I love myself.
I got you.
Right?
And you should. Yeah, you should. And to Noah's point, I know a person who owns a WNBA team. She's white. Her daughter had the same exact experience that I had, and we were both the same exact age, and she had a misdemeanor that they were able to close out on her record. I'm 38 almost in September, and I got my felony at 22. And to this day, I started my business because I can't promote in an organization, no matter how brilliant I am. I'm unable to promote because they have to keep doing background checks over and over again. So Noah, I hear you. I agree with you 100% that it makes me wonder sometimes if I was white, would I not have gotten that felony? And would that felony not still be following me around, 16 years later?
And I have never had any of my failures or obstacles or roadblocks from the system ever wondered, I wonder if it would be better if I was Black. I've never had that wondering as a white man. I know the answer.
I think we all do. Thank you. This has been thought-provoking. So I'm gonna shift gears a little bit. Hey, Mike, so as a D&I leader, right? I feel at some point you have to go to work with a flak jacket nowadays. It's a really, really tough job, but it's the most needed occupation we have right now. People like you have my ultimate. That being said, we know your cell phone is working wherever you are. So with my ultimate, with that being said, when you talk to your peers, I know you're having some great conversations about what I would call I and D versus D and I right now, and in the state of affairs that we're facing right now and what we're living in. So you want to share some of those conversations you're having with them right now?
Yeah, of course, definitely. And, I'm the Vice President and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the MTA. The MTA is the organization in New York that we transport 8 million people a day on our subway, our buses, and what have you, and our rails. We purchase about $6 billion in goods and services each year. So this year we made history. My staff of 45 and we became the first government agency in the country to pay in excess of $1.1 billion to minority women-owned firms in 1 year. And so, and the reason why that's important is because access to government contracts or corporate contracts, it equates to job creation in the Black community, home ownership, better educational opportunities, and better healthcare options. As we talk about what's happening in the country, we talk about how the Black community is not engaged. We talk about subpar conditions. So, for example, I was in the South Bronx last night having dinner. The Bronx County is the third poorest county in the country, And so you talk about drugs and alcohol and a lack of access to health care, as COVID-19 has pointed out, jobs and what have you. But one issue will solve all of those problems. That's access to a contract or a job. The best social program in this country is a job. And so if you have a viable contract where you're hiring people and they're getting hired and they're getting paid, they have a job. They have a path to homeownership or a path to quality housing, better health care, better education. So that one solution, access to contract jobs, is what will solve most of Black America's problems. Now, everybody is talking about how they need to hire a chief diversity officer now. But if you don't give that person adequate resources and adequate staff and support to drive effective and efficient change, it's only window dressing. So I am not going to have an intelligent conversation in 2020 with anyone, including Apple, who has no Blacks on their board. How is that possible in 2020 that a major corporation like Apple does not have a Black person on their corporate board? Which takes me back to, we are currently in a time period right now that's aligned with 1968. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, the assassination of Robert Kennedy, the Vietnam War, protesting, riots in the streets. And we basically left that era, but we did not create sustainable solutions that would allow Black people to advance to middle America or the mainstream of economic America. And so Washington, at that given point in time, they dumped a lot of federal monies on urban cities in order to quell the riots in the streets. That lasted for about 15 years until the election of Ronald Reagan, who essentially eliminated a lot of the programs that Blacks benefited from. Student loan program, SCOG, BEOG, Head Start, Model Cities, CETA. These are programs that Black America flourished on. Let me give you an example. In 1971, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, I'm from Harlem, but I grew up in Chicago, and Operation Push, they threatened to boycott GM because GM did not have any Black dealerships. So they went out to Chicago, and they found a super Black salesman who was in his late 20s. And GM brought him to New York and gave him a Oldsmobile dealership, which transformed into a Cadillac dealership. And the person's name was Dick Gidron. Dick Gidron Cadillac became one of the highest grossing Cadillac dealerships in the nation. But why did it take Operation Push and the Reverend Jesse Jackson to threaten to boycott GM if they didn't do this? And so in 2020, I had zero patience with talking to anybody about the lack of Blacks on corporate boards, the lack of Blacks getting contracts from your organization. I just think that we should take this moment in time to pivot, to make sure that the year 2020 does not reflect the year 1968 as we move forward. We need to come up with creative, sustainable solutions that will eradicate racism, that will allow Blacks to be able to be treated like any other race of people in this country. And I understand that we live in a nation that is just an experiment. It's a collection of states, red states versus blue states, urban versus rural, white, Black, and brown. We experienced a civil war. So we are a big experiment. So I'm just hoping, I'm praying that like-minded people can come up with sustainable solutions that will allow Black America to finally enter the mainstream of this nation and thrive like any other race of people.
Thank you, Mike. I felt like I need to drop a mic right now. That was so well quoted. Thank you very much for that. Absolutely. So let me add on to that a little bit as we kind of talk about this movement which really has been driven by millennials and almost millennials of all races and colors. So if you look at the NAACP, Camron, and that organization advocates for civil rights and people of color, specifically African Americans. You know, your mission has always been ultra important, but never more important than it is today. So what is your organization doing right now to fulfill that mission today, to take what Mike was talking about and carry us into 2021?
Right. So with that being said too, I've been very blessed to be part of the national NAACP social justice program, including my own chapter in Chesapeake here. And so and I'll speak from the national level, then I'll bring it down to our Chesapeake level. So the national wise, right, we've been charged to come up with social justice programs that find that gap within our communities and within our chapters, that we've been charged to come together as cohorts and say, okay, hey, like I'm the leader for the Virginia cohort, right? And so our social justice program is economic development, specifically empowering Black and Brown communities for wealth and ownership. Right, and so we're creating webinars, we're creating things, we're creating webinars, we're creating mentorships, mentees, and the key thing that we're learning is three things, right? Lack of knowledge, lack of access, lack of community. And what I mean by that is the knowledge side is you don't know what you don't know, right? And so the idea is that we're tapping into retired financial advisors. We're tapping into those who are retired, can pour back in a teaching mode, right? And so we're asking for the time, talent, and the treasure more so into these programs like this. And the access part now is that I may come up to a door with no door handle, right? But I'm asking for those who are retired, for those who are my mentors or older than me, or whoever, who are in a different or better position, who's past that 3 to 5 year hump of their business at least, to open the door from their end so I could walk through, right? And so because they're at the table, or at least they're in the room, hoping next that they are at that table, the key thing is that I want to be in the room with you, but I can't be in there unless you open the door. The third thing, though, is that not forgetting your community, how to go ahead and just as much as you're getting poured into, like my mentor, Delegate Hayes, was telling me the other day, who's your mentee? Just as much as I was asking him for stuff, he was like, now who are you going to pour into after this conversation? That's the same kind of drive that we're looking at to have on the national level. Now, now going to the chapter level is you got to be aware of what's going on within your city council. One of the things that we've asked many a millennial, especially Black Lives Matter here in the 757, we got a lot of people who were recently arrested on the oceanfront on protests. Okay, but I dare to ask, hey, those people who are arrested and those people who are different parts of organizations, we need to hear what is, contact Urban League, Hampton Roads Young Professionals, contact NAACP, whichever city, and ask them, are you a registered voter? What are you doing at the end of that protest? Are you writing down the demands and bringing it as a resolution to be put on the docket within your city council? Because we can protest all day long until it's brought to the city council's attention. So that's the local level, right? It's the understanding of knowing your rights, knowing where to go on what to do to make that change after you protest. Because honestly, I have a physical side or release. I gotta get out and that's part of being on that march. But there's also the mental side of that too, and strategically knowing how to do and what to do on the next steps. And that's contacting your already organized civil rights organizations to being part of that as well. So those two, and that's why I say also Urban League, Hampton Roads Young Professionals, is because you got to learn to partner. there's no room for individualism right now. We've got to work in unity with different organizations to make sure we're all on the same path. And if it comes to a matter of, well, who gets this, who gets that, sit down at the table as soon as possible to iron that out, because in the public's point of view, you're going to be looked at as individual organizations versus working on a collective front. And that's not where we want to be viewed.
So you touched on a couple key points, and I'm going to go back in and I want to kind of peel that onion back a little further. So talk to me about that collaboration. How is that collaboration working?
So the collaboration right now is just a matter of identifying specific people within chairs. It's working on levels of, if I have a problem with my local chapter, I bring it to and it can't be resolved. First, what we've been doing is, okay, I've recognized that we have a problem with membership, right? Do they want to collect a check versus creating a PayPal, right? It's as simple as small problems like that, right? But that could be a major thing because we need everybody's attention on things that we're fighting for, right? And so if that's a problem, you work it out at the table as soon as possible. If it's a bigger problem, then you go to the next step as far as the regional. And so what we've been doing is saying, okay, the easiest way to do this is put in black and white on memorandum of understandings, MOUs. And that's what you do as far as official partnerships. And that's what carries the black and white portion, right? And also the partnerships too is, to me, I don't look at it as mattering until it's in black and white and I see somebody else being held accountable for what's not going to get done when we ask for a quarterly report or when we ask for a monthly report. This whole verbal stuff is great until I ask you to sign stating that you're gonna be held accountable to this.
Awesome. So I'm going to open this next question up to everybody, but it's going to start with you. You touched on it, but we need to unpack it. I'm not going to let this go by. Voter registration. Talk about that. I mean, I know every one of you have to have some insight into how do we get and drive voter registration. I mean, protests are great. They show a point, they get visibility, they give you a voice, but protests without a strategy really becomes nothing. So how do we execute that and go forward with voter registration? What's your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts are getting trained on how to be a part of the education piece to what voting means. And that also ties in with Census 2020, right? The impact of who you're voting for by learning about them, by asking questions about who they are, or what they represent, morals, values, and also identifying not specifically with the party, right? But identifying specifically with your community and who's willing to meet those needs, and identifying what you're able to do to be part of that solution. Now, the training aspect to it is get in touch with your registrar's office. I highly suggest and encourage every person get in touch with their registrar's office to say, how can I, or what can I do to vote? Now, as military members, that's a little bit different. That's a little bit difficult and different. We have a lot of military members out there that do want to help in other ways, but you have to understand what part of being you can't be a part of, you have to be nonpartisan or not political, have to be nonprofit organizations you can assist with, right? However, it shouldn't stop you from asking your friends and family the number one question: are you a registered voter? But the problem, and even though that's the hardest question you can ask, you need to learn how to strategically put people in positions to answer it without even asking that direct question. In a sense of saying, like, you know what, man, I really don't like how things are going on within the country or whatnot. Who'd you vote for? Or how do you think you're going to vote this year? Or do you know where to go for your voting? Because a lot of people, they take it as an attack as, are you a registered voter? No, a lot of people aren't, and that's fine, and it's not really fine in the sense of if they're not, but you've got to address how can you have the comfortable conversations for them to have the conviction to go learn about voting and learn who to vote for.
That was awesome. Well said. So Kaylee, Mike, Noah, anybody want to lean in a little bit on this voter registration? This is the now topic for us right now.
Sure.
You know,
Go ahead, Michael. I'll go after you.
Ladies first.
Okay,
Ladies
thank
first,
you.
go ahead.
So there's two things. I think education is very important. I mentioned to you guys earlier that I'm a federal felon, and there's a lot of federal felons that are people of color, and they think, a lot of times people think you can't vote when you're a federal felon. So it's like being able to really understand what does that really mean for you, and being able to go out there and find out, get answers, you know? And so I think that's one piece of it. Another portion of it is I am a filmmaker. I'm a filmmaker because I want to educate people through ways that they will understand it. I think understanding people's different multiple intelligence. I make cartoons. I'm making a cartoon that'll be out in a month, and it's a Black cartoon. And I did that cartoon particularly to be able to speak to young people. Politics aside, one of the best things that Barack Obama did is that he stimulated college students, and college students went back home and they got their parents and they got their grandparents. And to be really transparent with you, we started Katie Hall Foundation. We followed his blueprint, and we got college students to get us into certain places. So I would just say, just know, like Camron said, know your audience. With young people, figure out how to speak to them. With older people, figure out how to speak to them. And for the people like myself who have felonies, federal felonies, get them the education that they need so that they can get back to voting.
Awesome. Thank you. So Mike, you want to lean in on that? And while he does, I'm going to close my blind because I'm tired of squinting.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, so there was a big city Black mayor who I became familiar with, and I was with him one day, and it was Mayor Harold Washington, the first Black mayor of the city of Chicago when I was in college. And Mayor Washington said, you know, I walk around with my urban planners. You know why? I says, no. Why? He says, because if you're not planning, you're being planned. If you're not planning, you are being planned. Second, one of my godfather in politics here is a guy by the name of Al Vann. And Al Vann was a reformer who took power when he went to the state capitol up in Albany, New York, and then back in the city council in New York. And Al Vann used to say that if there's someone in your household who is not voting, you should call NYPD and have them arrested. Because there's been so many people in this country that have lost their lives simply for trying to exercise their right to vote. But marching and protesting is one thing. Voting and raising money for candidates is something else. And then once your elected official wins, you got to hold them accountable to drive effective change, to fund programs, to have access of contracts to the black business community. And everybody is talking about right now the census. If 1,000% of people fill out those census forms, that's only half the battle. Because when your city or your state or your county gets funded, that's when you got to fight for those resources in order to get your programs funded, housing programs funded. So the struggle continues. I often say that from 1619 to 2020, the struggle continues. We cannot rest. Yes, we got to vote. Yes, we got to have our funding requests finalized, but we got to fight every day for our rights in this country.
Thank you. Noah, I'll give you an opportunity if you want to lean into that. Otherwise, I have another question for the group.
Bring us the next question in, and I'll lean in on that one. I think we got some good answers on the last one.
No worries. Thank you very much. So think about this, and I hear this a lot. And Noah, the reason I said I'm going to lean into the next question, because some of my white peers and counterparts, I have this discussion with them, and they say this. They go, you know, we can't really focus on these initiatives, these racial injustice initiatives, until we stop Black on Black crime first. So until we address Black on Black crime, there should be no reason to really focus on racial injustices until we address that first. And I hear that, and we have those discussions, and I've got my own opinion, which I'm not going to share because they're not paying me to share my opinion right now today, but we have all you experts, and I want to hear what you have to say about this and that statement.
That's another good question. My first response to that is white on white crime, which goes unreported every day. And one of the things that has happened in systemic overcriminalization of Black communities and 400 years of, my study of going back to even the policing question, this isn't to knock modern day officers, individuals who are trying to make a difference. But my understanding is that the original police, going back to Pinkerton Detective Agency, were put in charge of catching runaway slaves. And if you look at something from that structural angle, it's really hard to reform parts of that. Nonetheless, when I say white on white crime, I think that I remind white people every day, my own actions I shared earlier. I was harming my community. You know, domestic violence and drug abuse happens in white households every day. I know white collar crimes happen every day. So I use that as a degree of humility when I'm having conversations with white people to kind of, I want to introduce a little bit of disequilibrium, because my contention is that a lot of white people have been raised with the notion that the golden rule, if I treat everyone like an individual, if I ignore color and treat others as I want to be treated, then we won't have any problems around race or difference. And I think that's a falsity. I think what we're really saying is I'm uncomfortable and fragile because there is a power struggle and there is a history in this country, and that history still resonates with us today. So the black on black crime thing to me becomes a distraction. And it becomes a distraction from us looking at our own communities. It becomes a distraction for us advancing racial equity. And it becomes a distraction from advancing long-term systemic change. Again, another point I put in that is the amount of working class white people, for instance, that vote for Trump and perhaps would say, you know, yeah, black on black crime or something like that, and not understand how that thinking then leads them to vote for candidates who are actually against their own progression as well. So again, black on black crime becomes an escape, a way to not look in the mirror. And it's painful for many white people to think about looking in the mirror when it comes to race, when it need not be. It can be liberating. It can be edifying. It can be enlightening. So I think, again, addressing that point on as a distraction is a really powerful place to start.
That's another mic drop moment. I'm having several of these here.
Yeah.
So no, very well spoken.
I got a little red in my face on that one. The passion was coming in.
Oh yeah, you got tight. I saw it. You got tight. No. Anybody else want to talk about that subject and lean in a little bit?
Noah's spot on. Noah is definitely spot on with many of those many of those key points there. And you know, and as I was even thinking about this question, you know, I kept thinking about like, man, I don't really want to tie up time with a distraction. How do I get to, and that's exactly it. It's a distraction in a way that it provides statistic results, but that's not what that isn't what the aim should be for when you look at a community. What community solutions are you trying to bring? And so the fallacy of it looks so much like a sense of justification for who was ever saying it, so that they're not addressing truly many of the matters of systemic injustices that are going on within our communities. So I'm not going to say and repeat every single thing Noah said, but Noah's spot on with those, on many of those key points in there. Thank you. Thank you for saying those.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. Both Noah and Camron, they're spot on. But let me say this: that when the system keeps people out of mainstream America, all they have left is their pride. And so when you violate somebody's pride when they don't have anything else, it's going to be a swift, immediate reaction. And so once again, if Blacks are allowed to enter the mainstream of this economy, crime goes down. Let me give you a story. I was flying home one time from Chicago. It was a long weekend, and there were 87 shootings and 19 murders in one weekend in the city of Chicago. And Donald Trump indicated that if the mayor, that was Rahm Emanuel back then, if he didn't get his city together, that Donald Trump threatened to send the army in there to restore order. But my response to a short-sighted Donald Trump would have simply been that if you and some of your billionaire friends come in and invest in the city of Chicago and create manufacturing jobs, you'll see the crime rate will go down. Because Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, all those Rust Belt cities that lost manufacturing are now trying to reinvent themselves. So Pittsburgh has reinvented itself into a medical corridor of research and what have you. And so the thing that made this nation great, manufacturing, we found a way to export that. And now we are setting up, Ford is closing plants in the US, but investing $8 billion in Mexico by building new plants because they want to take advantage of cheap labor. So if we reinvest back in our country that what made us great, you would see the crime rate go down, as opposed to people who don't have anything and they're focusing on their pride, or they're getting involved in drug dealing and territorial beefs. You will have viable people working, earning a living, migrating to the middle class, and you will see the crime rate will go down.
Awesome. Well said. Well said. Anyone else? Before I ask this another question, because these are questions that when I say peers, other executives in the industry have asked me at different times. And this one was a bombshell to me because if you think about it, think about this statement, the Black Lives Matter movement. Think about that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you guys to clarify this, to clarify what it means, because there's some confusion when people say Black Lives Matter. It assumes that no other lives matter except Black lives. And that's some major confusion. And I want to help me help others understand what the statement means, Black Lives Matter. Who wants to touch that first?
I'll kick it off. I think it's individual per person. Let's start there. For me, when I hear Black Lives Matter, it means that my life matters in corporate. My life matters if I'm on the streets. My life matters if I'm in a courtroom. My life matters as a mother. Even on a very, very small scale with microaggressions in the workplace. If I speak in a meeting and someone else come over and they speak over me in particular, let's say if it's a white man or a white woman, that I spoke about that first. I brought that point up. I think Black Lives Matter from the very small details to the very large systemic issues that happens in this country as a whole. I believe in Black Lives Matter. I'm Black, my kid's Black, my husband Black, my daddy's Black, my mama's Black. And so Black Lives Matter. If it wasn't for the work that like our foremothers and our forefathers have done, we wouldn't be here. But one thing that is true, and no one can argue with it, is that Black lives are not equal whatsoever. I mean, Noah and I, we know each other. And the privilege walk, I don't know if you did that, Noah, before, but I know I love the privilege walk. And I do that with young people all the time, high school students. And I even, hey, no, you're not white anymore. You're Black. You're a Black man and you're from Detroit like me. So I think that when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying, and I'm not saying that other people don't matter, but what I am saying is that we don't have equal anything unless we go out there and make it for ourselves. And so when we hear that statement, we're just saying our lives matter just as much as anybody else's. We're not saying that your life don't matter.
Awesome. Very well said. Anyone else want to add it? And by the way, that statement you have over your right shoulder, I just wrote that down. As a father of 3 daughters, I was like, man, I'm going to introduce them to that statement. Well-behaved women rarely make history. I thought that was brilliant. I just wrote that down.
Thank you. I'm not behaved at all.
Well, we've already detected that. Well done. Who else wants to add into this Black Lives Matter statement? It's intriguing to me how it's being misinterpreted in the marketplace.
I heard Randall Stevens, the former CEO of AT&T, say, you know, when we take a walk for breast cancer, we don't say, what about prostate cancer? When we say, I love my daughter, we don't say, what about our sons? For some of us, when they say, God bless America, we don't say, what about the rest of the world? And so for me, it's like you extend that same logic over here, except the problem again is that the majority of white people have been taught to be colorblind, which allows a system of racial inequity to perpetuate on a personal and systemic level.
Yeah, I would have to definitely, I love when I hear seeing those different stories like that or hearing those different comments like that, you know, but the key thing is that, you know, not all lives can matter until Black Lives Matter. Not all lives can matter, and specifically right now, Black Lives Matter, but not all lives can matter until brown lives matter. And so that's the idea, the concept is that when you're putting that fight behind that community stance, is that specifically right now, Black Lives Matter because of this injustice, and this injustice. I will speak a little bit to the military side on that too, is because we've had that issue where the sexual assault or sexual harassment, right? And so what it takes is that, that's what I love about the military, is that we are so quick to provide intrusive leadership on many of these issues, because just like that, we have to respond and come together and go as a unit to defend and fight for something as a unit, whether if it's a fire, whether if it's a mission or whatever. But the key thing is that we have to drop many of these concepts or many of our thinking. So we're quick to adjust and try to address issues, right? So with this, it was a little bit hesitant at first. But I will say that the military, even specifically the Navy, we officially have a task force that was just put together this month to address racial inequalities within the workplace and in and out of uniform. We've got to know our sailors in that way. So when it comes back to identifying, hey, what can I add value to? How can I do something? It's a matter of addressing the fact first that my life matters, because that could have been me with my neck being pushed on and smashed on like that. That could have been me being shot at like that. So that's why my life matters, because I have my emotions attached to this, and I have to come with a straight face to be okay when really I'm not.
Great, thank you. So,
You know, the Black Lives Matter is a movement based upon the killing of a Black man. It's a movement. The younger generation, they're not going to accept being treated in an adverse manner, and rightfully so. They shouldn't. I think that those of us in our 40s and 50s, we've become more conservative. We became more complacent to a lot of the stuff that was going on. But the younger generation, and once again, rightfully so, they created a movement, and it was a swift response to a injustice. And so this new movement that we're seeing right now is long overdue. I mean, I'm marveling into what's happening right now as a result of all of these injustices that's happening all across the nation. That law enforcement officer in Minnesota, he had no way of knowing that he was going to create an international movement towards driving effective change and focusing on equality. I'm marveling, but I'm also cautious, because I just want to once again stress the fact that we got to maximize this opportunity and this moment. That this moment is going to be a movement to drive effective, efficient, sustainable change. So the Black Lives Matter movement is long overdue. Long overdue.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm a firm believer that the millennial generation is making this movement work, and we've got to continue to support and fuel them so they can execute this and finish this and get us to a resolution. So I'm with you. And someone asked this question, so I'm going to add to that. They said, how do we get more people involved in community organizations? What are your recommendations? We talked about voter registration a little bit, but we didn't talk about, and we talked about education. How do we rally them and get even more of them involved? Because there's still a tremendous amount of people on the sidelines. If you look at this situation we're dealing with now today, this racial inequality, you have a large percentage of people who believe there's an issue. You have people that believe there's not an issue, and then you have people in the middle who are being silent. That's even worse than not picking a side, but that's another topic for another day. So how do we get more people involved in community organizations?
I think it's simple. People need to do things that resonate with them, period. I think that Urban League is awesome. I did work for the NAACP here locally in Washington State, started an NAACP chapter when I was in college, but I am an entrepreneur. I am a free spirit and I have to work on my own. And then I bring people in collectively and I work with people that way, but we're all different. And I don't think that one of the issues I do have with some of the larger foundations and larger organizations, they suck up all the money and then we don't get money at some of the smaller organizations. And so I think that there's several ways of doing this, but just get people involved with what they really do care about. I mean, I care about what the police do. My brother was shot by the police several times. He wasn't killed, so it didn't make news, right? And he also went to prison for something for 8 years that he should have maybe got a smack on the wrist for. I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a felon. I'm also a very declarated educator. I teach at several colleges, and I have my own business and my own nonprofit. But I think that people have to lock into what's important to them. And if we all do that, then we can make the systemic change happen. I don't want anybody coming to our organization just because they feel like they have to, but they really don't believe in women having equal rights, or women being able to have a seat at the decision-making table, or women making the same amount of money as white men in their career fields. I was the campaign director for I-1000. In the state of Washington, we don't have affirmative action. I was the person that was pushing that campaign around our state to be able to bring affirmative action back. We lost by a half a percentage point. I'm a Black-owned business. We worked very hard. We made maybe $25,000 for a 2-month campaign. There was a white strategist, and I did most of the work, and he made $100,000. That's an issue right there. So, I mean, those are the examples. We have to be able to work with things that we really care about and not be fake, just to be cool.
Yeah, I'll rip off that. I think too, I'll throw in the word intersectionality on this piece, and I'm quoting the work of Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, famous Black feminist thought pioneer. And the intersectionality piece is really about when we have community functions right now, you know, a lot of white people and others understanding, moving beyond the term people of color and really bringing in the term Black, so BIPOC, and really focusing on targeting anti-Blackness and supporting pro-Black business and pro-Black space and naming it such as that and claiming it such as that. Other forms of intersectionality, like Kela is bringing in gender, generational, like several of you said. I think certainly amongst white men, but I've noticed it in other communities as an outsider too. We always have a hard time passing the baton when we're past our prime. And it's my problem with large organizations too. It's like, I don't understand it. When, you know, and generally people are usually in those places at a fairly comfortable economic place in their life, and they have a legacy, and they don't understand that actually if they got out of their own way, their legacy would live forever because they would empower the next generation of people behind them. But instead they shrivel up and die on the baton. So I think that intersectional piece, even sexual orientation, and that makes some of our listeners uncomfortable. I'm heterosexual, and I've done a lot of work about some of the negative ways I used to view gay people, and I've changed my mindset about that. That stuff all matters if we're really going to advance Black lives mattering.
Yeah. Hey, and I want to add that too. So the NAACP and Urban League, what we tend to do right now, because we definitely identify like, okay, hey, how are we getting this? How are we pushing more of the millennials? How are we pushing more on younger age groups to be more engaged and involved, right? And it's the attention span aspect. That's what we really focus on first is, okay, well, so what we do is we put together a text drive, and we quickly say, hey, we're gonna have at 8 o'clock, we're gonna all text the Attorney General and get the specific of, and it automatically creates this generated letter, and it sends directly to his office. And next thing you know, he's got 250 people, 250 emails that just went into his office email. And to a lot of people or younger generations, that's like an immediate impact. That immediate impact of saying, oh my gosh, I just did something. What can I do next? And so I keep that drive going until it's almost like I give it out. It's almost like just a huge field or a huge garden in this way, right? And you're waiting to see who's gonna bloom. What did they catch? And then I start pouring more into those who did catch and those who did bloom. Because here's the thing is that I need to worry about those who are catching things versus those who are being taught something. And because that's where the genuine and the passion side of the community building is going to come from. I need to know that you genuinely just caught this. And once I see and that you caught it, I'm going to teach you now some of the carry-ons to this. And so that's what's been key for us as far as Urban League and NAACP is getting the small attention things first, and then adding those people to committees. and then guiding them and showing them for the longer ones. But then coming back to, okay, another text, kind of like another text thing, let's go, let's go, let's go. And then joining them and letting them see that they have purpose, that they have action right now going on, and you can make the immediate impact.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to try to button up with this last question to all of you because it kind of slid by. I don't remember who said it. I know who said it. It was Kela. Kela, you said it. You just slid the word out and you just sat it out there. And then I was looking at faces and people were going, what? When you said microaggressions, you said it. It's like me just going, ooh, for a group of speakers, you guys are very articulate. Yeah, we're talking microaggressions here. So can you dip into microaggressions and talk a little bit about what that is, explain to people what it is and why they probably get it and it's happening to them over and over. They weren't even aware of it. And everybody can lean in on this after Kela.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be really transparent, Noah was one of my teachers with D&I work as far as like the way it looks like more from a professional level, for sure. Now, microaggressions, I think that if you are living today and you're over 1 day old, you have experienced microaggressions. And for me personally, my microaggressions happens a lot in boardrooms. I go into boardrooms and I train them. My microaggression I just had recently was with one of our local colleges. I was their crisis manager, and their acting president did not want to respond to the media, and she was in trouble. And I explained to her, you're going to respond because it's my job to communicate for the college. And if you don't respond, it's going to make it look like we're lying. And so she told me, no, I'm not doing it. Then a white colleague came right behind in that same email and emailed her and said, you need to respond. She's right. These are the reasons why you want to respond. And what happened? She responded. And I brought that right back to her the very next day. And I said, this is why I love being a business owner. Because I can come in your organization, I could be a part of this for a moment here, but this is why your school is dealing with so many institutional racism issues. This is why you have white and Black people defacing Japanese American murals. This is why Black people don't have voices at this college. And actually today is my last day there. I'm really excited, and they'll bring me back on as a contractor where I have my own voice. But that is an example of a microaggression. You usually know when it happens because you feel a little weird. Your stomach might turn a little bit, or you might be like, did that person really say that to me? But you got to call it out. And I don't care who it is. I believe in coaching up. If you're the president, I mean, right now a governor is one of my clients, our former governor. And I tell him all the time, you know, Governor Locke, you shouldn't do that. And you have to be okay with coaching up and just talking to people in general. And if you're not okay with it, go home, practice, find somebody to talk to, and come back the next day and talk to them. But microaggressions happen all the time. That's just one of my examples that was recent.
Great example. Absolutely great. Anybody else want to lean in on this a little bit? Okay. I'm detecting people are tired.
I was giving space, but I would jump in real quick. I think microaggressions just reinforce where Kela was coming in. It's really the micro indignities that further reinforce, to use, I think, Mr. Michael Garner's framework earlier, that outsiders, those kept out of the system, are outside of the system. And those micro inequities, whether through language, you know, gosh, JD, you're so articulate, as though I wouldn't expect a Black man to be articulate, as though I wouldn't expect President Obama, graduate of an Ivy League school, to be articulate. You know, and or whether it's sometimes physical even. I was walking with my wife and daughter the other day, who are both Black. I'm a stepfather to my daughter, and we were in a park. You know, we have the COVID thing going on, and everyone has their masks on. And we were definitely social distancing in our own lane. Yet this large white man who was jogging, that was 6 feet apart on the other side of the trail, felt that my wife and daughter were a threat to his safety. So he actually came over and put his hand on and said, you all need to move over to your side. And he could have given them COVID. That's a microaggression. Where did you speak English? Where are you from? All these things that remind one that they have less power and privilege. And the trick with it is often it comes across, people think they're giving a compliment because they're so unpracticed and unskilled in diverse partnerships and in cross-cultural communication. They actually think they're giving a compliment. So just as Kela said, the way around it is coaching up. And I teach white people, to bring in Cameron's earlier thought, to use bystander intervention, which is the military term for don't just stand and watch something happen that you know is wrong. You have to speak to your peers. It shouldn't be Kela that has to just articulate for herself when a white man microaggresses her, or a white woman. We should be able to lean in. And it shouldn't just be a Muslim that has to defend themselves against a microaggression if it's around religion. We should lean in and say, hey, that's not right. We don't treat people like that around here. So that's powerful. And let me keep it even more real as someone who's definitely microaggressed against people. We also have to be willing to be called out. And this is something that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Too many of us think that calling out is a challenge to our ego, not an opportunity to grow in our own awareness and in our partnership with others. And when people call out a behavior, but call us into partnership, they are asking us to re-examine our behaviors and our blind spots so that we can work together more effectively. So whether it's our male ego or whatever other egos get in the way of that at times, certainly the white ego, that needs to be silenced and understood, the greater prize that one is bringing you.
Definitely well said. So I'm going to give them this closing microaggression that I hear a lot. Wow, JD, I don't see you as Black.
Oh my God.
What do you see me as? Green, orange, purple? It's amazing to me because if you don't see me as Black, then you don't see me as a person right off the bat. So, but I will say to you that that is a very common statement that's being said as a compliment, that I don't see you as Black. But it's truly not a compliment. So I will tell you, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I want all of you on this chat window to give these presenters a round of applause, some great comments, give them some love. It has been phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And I want to thank you all. It has been an honor, an absolute honor. And Lynette, I agree with you. If they don't put this on national and have this panel back together on the National Conference on Diversity Week, in September, October, whatever they're going to do with this week. I think this year it's October, I think. It's an injustice. A phenomenal, phenomenal panel. So thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you who have joined. I absolutely want to turn this over to Vanya Aleem now so that we keep you on time because she has some closing comments and some closing remarks. Vanya?
Thank you, JD. And again, I want to echo your sentiments of thanking the panel. I want to thank you, JD, as the moderator. Let's give it up again for Camron, Phillips, Kela Hall, Noah Prince, and Mike Garner. Just phenomenal. I'm off mic so I can clap and you can hear me. Phenomenal job. Want to thank all of our members, our guests, attendees, participants who joined this session. It has been just beyond amazing and informative and insightful. So thank you all for joining us. As you know, if you follow NAMIC-Virginia, we have been delivering a plethora of content really since COVID broke out, and we're not going to stop. So our next event is going to be panel discussion, that is going to be on August 6th. It's another Let's Talk About It series. This one is Let's Talk About It. I heard you. August 6th from 5 to 6:30. So please plan on joining us again for another thought-provoking conversation and dialogue. If you want to stay up to par on what we're doing as a chapter, please follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. We have changed our survey frequency. Given that we have so many events per month, we don't want to over-survey our participants and our members. So we're moving to monthly surveys. However, if you have feedback that you'd like to share with us, you can DM us on any of our social media platforms or email us. We welcome the feedback. Thank you again for a phenomenal evening. Everyone stay safe, healthy, and well. We look forward to seeing you again on August 6th. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for joining.